Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to the video. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to be making the fiberglass door panels for Wratchet. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not looking forward to this video. This might be a good video for you guys to watch. As a matter of fact, I hope it's a good video for you guys to watch. But I can tell you from experience, this type of fiberglass work I'm going to be doing, I don't like it. It's a necessary step, and it has to be done. And I'm really excited to make the fiberglass one-piece front end. I'm super excited to give that a go. But I can't do that until I have all the other fiberglass pieces done. And I've already made the roof and the two rear quarters, and I made the one door. But I need to make the other door. And the reason I'm not looking forward to it is because it's not just making a copy of Mahler's panels. Like when I made the rear quarters, those I'm just copying the rear quarters, and although there's a couple of steps to it, I'm really just taking a copy and making this fiberglass panel, and that's actually kind of fun. But the door, because it is not a regular Volkswagen door, has to be customized. But in addition to that, I cannot just make a completely custom piece because I want it to retain the curves and the look of an original Volkswagen door. So it has that signature curve going this way that a Volkswagen Bug does, and it also has a curve going this way. Believe it or not, these doors are not straight. They actually have a curve going this way. It's minor, but it's not just a flat panel. And if I tried to just make this die, they would call it out of foam, it would look like just a flat panel with a radius over the tube, and I don't want that. I want it to completely blend into the rear quarter, and so in order to do that, I first have to make a copy of the original Volkswagen door, and then once I have that copy, I need to take those and make a die with this proper radius, with these nice little flares, and most importantly, I want it to flare up here, and I want it to blend into this quarter panel in a way that makes it look somewhat like it belongs there. Now, I'm not going to sit here and do a 5-minute audio of just me telling you about all the steps because, to be quite honest, there's a lot of steps to get to this point. And this video, like the other ones, will be more than just one video. It'll be episode 1, 2, maybe 3. I'll probably try to keep it down to just episode 1 and 2. But this is episode 1, and what I'm going to do is just dive into it, start working on the project, and I'm just going to film it, and then I'm going to do a voiceover as the work's being done so I can just explain to you guys what I'm doing. So one thing that is kind of nice about doing the doors is I can actually unbolt them from Mahler or from any Volkswagen and lay them down horizontal so I don't have to work on the stuff vertically like I did when I did the rear quarter panels or even the roof. So although I'm not a huge fan of doing this work on the doors, it's much nicer that I can just take them and lay them down. Now that I've got the door outside, first thing I'm going to do is just spray it down with some water so I can do some wet sanding with 1000 grit sandpaper. Not really looking to get it super smooth or anything like that. I just want to give it a nice smooth surface so that the epoxy can release from it without too much trouble. Now the doors, when I customize these doors, they need to go up a little bit higher and over a little bit in an area where typically they wouldn't cover at all. So to cover that area, I just clamped on this little piece of steel that's relatively flush. Now that I've got that piece of steel on there, I'm just putting some caulk around the hinges, and I'm going to put a little bit of caulk across that piece of metal just so that when I lay this up, the resin can't ooze down in there and cause the piece to stick to the door. And this is just regular silicone caulk that you can get at the hardware store. It's nothing fancy at all. If it's got silicone in it, the resin doesn't stick to it at all. Now there's a couple of areas on this door, like where the indentation is and the slots for the door handle, and I don't want any of that stuff on my new door panel. But I don't want to go through all the trouble of actually filling this in with Bondo because number one, it's a lot of work. Number two, I still want to use this door when I'm done. So I found this self-adhesive plastic that I'm using, and I'll put a link to it in Amazon. And you can't use polyester resin or gel coat with this, but I'm going to do this first layer with just epoxy resin because it does not react with this plastic. And it's a real nice shortcut just for covering some stuff like this up. Now here I'm just putting on a nice liberal coat of wax as my releasing agent. Because there's no Bondo or anything on here, I'm not going to do a coat of PVA or anything. I'm just putting on a nice thick layer of wax. And then, like I said earlier, because I'm using this self-adhesive plastic, it kind of makes it so that I can't use polyester on here. Typically I would use polyester, but in addition to that reason, because this panel I'm making right now is essentially a sacrificial panel, I decided just to use epoxy, and I have a lot of epoxy left over from when I did the roof mold, so I need to burn some of this stuff up, so it seemed like a good opportunity to use the epoxy. What I'm doing here is just kind of laying down a first layer, kind of like as if it was gel coat, just to give the fiberglass mat here a barrier so that I'm not putting the fiberglass mat right up against the metal. And then I'm just going to ooze resin all over this. The epoxy resin does not work as well with the chopped strand mat as polyester resin, but like I said, I ended up buying more of this epoxy resin than I needed when I was originally doing the roof mold, so I'm just kind of burning some of it up here. And then I'm actually making this panel, or this mold, what I'm making right now is a mold. I'm actually making this 2 layers of the chopped strand mat thick, which is pretty thick, but that's because the doors, since they're mostly flat and they just have a little curve to them, they don't hold their shape real well, and I do want to capture the shape of this door when I make the panel from this mold. So since I was burning up epoxy anyway, I made this 2 layers of the chopped strand mat, which will make this mold pretty thick, or pretty strong. Much cooler outside right now, so when I was done, and epoxy takes longer to set up, I brought the panel in, put some heat lamps on it overnight. And then the next morning I take it back outside, and I'm taking my straight edge and making real accurate marks of where the edge of the door is, because I want to definitely try and retain as much of the size and the squareness of this door as I possibly can. And now we get to the fun part of actually popping the mold off of the piece or the door. And one thing that's kind of cool on this one is because I didn't use any gel coat, it's essentially clear, and you can actually see it separating from the door panel as I'm working it along. That was kind of cool. I did find out that although this resin does separate from the plastic, it was sticking to it a little bit more than it was the door. So you can see me kind of work the area where I put the plastic on the door handle right there, and the other area up by the hinge. I had to work those a little bit harder than I did the rest of the door, but it wasn't too bad. The crackling noise is very satisfying when you're popping this stuff off. And there we go. Success. Now just using the grinder with a cutoff wheel to cut this along the lines that I made, and I'm actually staying real accurate because, like I said, I do want this to be as accurate as possible to the original door size and shape. Now that I've got that piece, I've cleaned it up. Now I'm putting wax onto the back side of this piece, because what I'm doing here is just as fast as I pulled that piece off, I'm turning around, and now I'm making a piece off of the inside of this piece now being the mold, and the piece that I'm making here, and now I'm using gel coat on this because this piece is actually going to be part of the piece or the die that I make on the chassis to make the next mold off of for the actual door. So this one I want the gel coat because the gel coat makes it look nicer, and I'm going to have to do some sanding and stuff, and it's a lot easier to do that with the gel coat. I'm essentially just laying this up the same way I did the door. I did use polyester gel coat, however, I'm still, because this is still a sacrificial panel, I'm still going to be burning up epoxy resin. So as I'm laying up this piece, I'll be using epoxy resin just like I did on the original. And again, it would be easier with polyester, and polyester works a lot better with this chopped strand mat. Being that I'm using epoxy here, it doesn't break down the fibers that hold the chopped strand mat together as well. So you really got to work it in with this roller. It's a lot more work, and the polyester dries quicker. The polyester is just better altogether. But like I said, I'm trying to burn through some epoxy that I bought here. So I decided as long as these panels are essentially sacrificial, I might as well use some of it up. And then it's still cold outside, so after that was all done, brought it inside again and put the heat lamps on it for the next day. Now it's the next morning. It's nice and dry, so I'm just putting the wedges in here to pop it off. This is a flat panel, so this is coming off really, like, ridiculously easy. Now going back outside and trimming the edges of this. This I didn't have to scribe the lines because the gel coat makes a real crisp line around the edge of the mold. Now that I've got that panel, what I need to start doing is I've got this piece of aluminum that I made with the same shape as the doors, or the curvature of the Volkswagen Bug body. And I need to make a bunch of these pieces so that I can stack them together and essentially make a foam core of the door that I want on Wratchet. So I bought this is an electric styrofoam cutter, and I'll put a link in the description to this as well. This is 10 times fast forward right here. This process is really slow, and you got to make a whole bunch of these pieces. But I'll show you later on how this all comes together. But at this point, it's just a process of transferring this piece from piece to piece to piece and cutting it out so that I can stack these all together. And it's the only way I could think of. You see this curve right here is the portion of the fiberglass door that's going to wrap up over the top bar. And I want that to be really consistent, and I'm making that from scratch. I'm not copying anything off of that. So that's why I wanted to use this template so that I could make all these pieces of styrofoam exactly the same, especially on the top. And you'll see how that wraps around the top bar and keeps it consistent. Again, this is 10 times fast forward. This is a very long process cutting all these out, but it worked really well on the other door, so I wanted to obviously do that as well on this side, and it's the same template I used on the other door, so it should keep things consistent. And now you can see I've taken spray adhesive to one side of all of these pieces. I've got a piece of 1/8 inch masonite taped up to the door there, and I'm just stacking these pieces one after one after one, hanging them over the top bar. And what it creates is essentially a foam core of the door that has the curvature built into it, and it keeps it real consistent all the way across. And the main reason that I did this is so that I can get a very consistent curvature on the top where it wraps over. And that part's really important for looks, but it's also just really important because you're going to be sitting on that part when you get in and out. So I wanted it to be consistent, and I wanted to be able to make it really strong. Now that I've got all those pieces bolted together, I wanted to adhesive them to this piece of masonite, and I'm just using some extra white silicone. This stuff actually works really good as adhesive. So I'm just putting the door up there. I'm going to prop it with some pressure, and I'll just leave it all night to just cure. And then from there, I will show you what I have so far. So this is going to be my breaking point for this video. I want to show you guys where I'm at right now. I've created this, let's call this a foam core for the door, and it's got the foam wrapped around the tube up here, and because these are all the same, it keeps the fiberglass an equal distance off of the tube. You can see on the other door panel, which I already made, I'll basically end up laying the fiberglass over that, And then when I actually make the piece off of that, I made that portion of the fiberglass really thick. And that's why when I made the foam, I kept it about a quarter of an inch off of that tube, because I want this to be strong enough, because when you get in and out of this vehicle, you're basically sitting on this. So the fiberglass right up through here, and it goes down about this far, is 4 layers thick, which it's not a quarter of an inch thick, but it's probably 3/16 of an inch thick. It's really thick through here. So what I have is, I've got this piece, and this right now can be removed. I have tack welded on this piece, which I don't think I've shown you guys this yet, but this piece has, if you can see, the same contour as the body as well. You can see it on this side. The fiberglass actually bolts up to it and stays tight to it. And what that does is, of course, the first thing it does is it gives the door a nice surface to be pressed up against and hold its shape. It's got a body grommet there, and it's got a body grommet here. But another thing it does is, when you've got the one piece front end on here, or if you happen to be running without it, if I didn't have this piece, that would basically be an air scoop, and it would just create a ton of air and debris always being sucked into the cab area. So I got this piece here which blocks almost all of that off, and this will be more solid welded once I finish welding up the whole chassis. So now that I have this general shape going, I need to take this skin, which remember is a perfect replica of the exterior skin of the bug body, and I need to glue it onto the exterior of this foam, and then make sure that it takes the contour of my metal there, the contour of my metal here, and then this styrofoam has the curvature going this way, but it doesn't have the curvature going this way. It's a perfectly flat panel because it's straight with the tube up here. And if you remember, I was really concerned with keeping the curvature in this piece. So what I do is, once I get this into position, I'll be gluing it with silicone, just like I glued the styrofoam to the masonite. And with the silicone, you can put it on real thick. And what I'll do is I'll set this panel in place, and then I'll push it up against the foam so that it touches all of the silicone that I'm going to dab on there. But then I allow it to kind of come off a little bit. I'll keep it tight up here because I'm going to do all sorts of body filler and stuff up here, but I'll let the bottom come off a little bit, and it's just going to pull the silicone out a little bit, and it'll allow it to keep some of that shape. It's already going to have this shape, but it'll allow it to keep some of that shape. And then I'll leave it there overnight, and overnight that silicone will dry, and it will still be adhesive. It's still going to hold that fiberglass in place, but it's going to allow it to kind of take its own shape. So that's how I can get away with having this styrofoam, but then have this piece, which is not as straight as that styrofoam, still kind of get its own curvature going in that. So I'll set this up and I'll glue it, and I'll let it sit tonight, and then tomorrow, probably afternoon, it'll be good to go so that I can start working with this stuff up here. But that's going to be the next video, because I've already been working on this for over a week, and I don't want it to go too far before I actually make a video of it. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. I don't like leaving you guys hanging there, but doing all this stuff is going to be a lot of work as well, so that would be way too much for one video. So thanks for watching the video. I hope it's helping you guys out with whatever you're working on, and I hope to see you on part 2.